everybody. Welcome to the Latched Mama podcast. We are back. It is officially October, and we are talking today about bullying because apparently October is National Bullying Awareness Month or something. I don't know. Doesn't really matter because we should be talking about bullying all the time because it's not a great thing, but it's something that we cannot ignore that happens within motherhood. But we're going to talk about it more on the child level today. We have our resident. Can I call you our resident? Can you just keep coming back forever and ever and ever?
I'll come back whenever you want me to.
I love it. Jentae is here talking to us again about school counseling and how we can help our children overcome some of those difficult moments. You're listening to the Latched Mama podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Wirt, business owner and tired mom of 5. Join us each week as we talk about pregnancy, nursing, parenting, and all things motherhood. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to give a quick little bio? I know you were here a couple months ago before we started getting back to school with COVID and stuff, and thought maybe we could talk again. You want to tell people about yourself?
Sure. So I am a school counselor with both elementary and middle school experience. I am the JK through 12 school counselor at the Stewart School.
Awesome.
So just recently made that transition to private from being in Chesterfield earlier in my career and recently in Henrico County. I'm an educational consultant, the energetic counselor.
I love it.
And I actually also work as an educational specialist doing consulting and coaching for developmental health and wellness.
Wow.
It is located in Henrico, and we do all things with school-based mental health and private psychological testing. So, yeah, check us out.
Fantastic.
With that.
So my guess is that you've had a lot of exposure across the board with different communities. With what bullying kind of looks like and the effects it can have on kids and their self-esteem and all of that wonderful stuff. Talk to me a little bit, just kind of overall, what you see from a school counselor perspective, what it stems from, and then we'll kind of go from there.
So sure. So the last time I was here, we talked a lot about just the absence of social interaction with kids and the role that that uniquely plays now versus pre-pandemic. Many times when I see children struggle with bullying or negative interactions between peers, usually the culprit is either a background of trauma. So they've learned certain survival skills that are not socially acceptable, or they just lack social skills, either due to immaturity, or it could be due to social or behavioral challenges that they're having. Many times we see with like ADHD, we see some deficits with social interactions, definitely with different parts of the autism spectrum. Social component is huge for students that are on the autism spectrum.
And are we talking about the people who are doing the bullying or the people who are getting bullied, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. But sometimes on the victim standpoint, it can be some hypersensitivity. It can be issues with not knowing how to respond correctly. How do I advocate for myself and say, I don't like this or I don't want this? But then also for the aggressor or the bully, not knowing how to socialize, not knowing how to interact with their peers, wanting attention, but not knowing how to seek any other attention other than negative attention. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure this isn't rocket science, but when kids are bullied, what happens?
Sure. So I think there are certain things that I really wish I could tell parents to meet me around the corner at the coffee at Starbucks so I can tell them like parent to parent and not have to always put on this like brave like PR face.
I love that.
But, when children are dealing with conflict,
Yep.
sometimes I don't like using the word bully in all ways because it almost like it hits this trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I prefer to think of it as just children in conflict, because I think conflict and bullying can sometimes be very easily confused.
And I also think the word bullying, just in general, not to interrupt you,
Yeah,
puts
sure.
parents on the defensive.
It does.
If you're told that your child is bullying somebody else or
Mhm.
acting like a bully,
Mhm.
all of a sudden I think it puts, like I said, parents on the defensive.
So when I hear bullying as a school counselor, I want to immediately unpack that. Tell me what's happening. And what I want parents to know is, it is extremely difficult from the school side to say, well, I don't want my child near that child anymore. Well, if they're in the same class, that's really unrealistic. I mean, we can be vigilant about supervision, but it's really unrealistic for one teacher in a classroom of 25 kids to keep two of them totally away from each other all day long. It's just not realistic.
Yep.
On the other side of that, though, if I'm a parent and my child is being bullied by your child, let's say, I cannot request that your child be moved out of my child's class. I can't make a decision about someone else's child. Now, I can ask a school to say, hey, I think my child is really having a lot of issues with this other child. Can they be moved to another class? As a last resort, certainly.
Okay.
But, we can't dictate other children being moved that are not our own. And I often hear that from the school standpoint.
Like you want the person who's getting bullied to stay in that safe environment, that routine environment, but they want the other kid moved because the other kid is the one that's acting out or doing the bullying.
Right, which makes sense, especially if you're a tiger mom.
Absolutely. I was going to say mama bear all day long. Absolutely.
Right, that's your baby. But from a school standpoint, kind of understand the position that puts us in. I also get a lot of requests for parents of the victim to want to meet with the parents of the bully.
I mean, I kind of feel like that's like the first reaction.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I would hope that that's coming from like the idea of you want to understand and you want to understand where it's coming from, but maybe not with everybody.
Sure. We want to assume the best, but we have to plan for the worst sometimes. That can create a really hostile environment because, to be honest, both parents are there for their child.
Absolutely.
And no matter how much we try to, think that our child is not perfect.
Yep.
When you got two parents going head to head, that creates a really hostile environment for a school to be able to facilitate.
Yeah.
So those are just two things that I often hear as requests that are very emotionally charged that I really want parents to kind of take a step back and think about what position that puts the school in when a request like that is made.
So is there mediation that ever happens between two students?
Sure. So with that said, conflict resolution skills are key. They are life skills.
Absolutely.
As adults, we learn conflict resolution. We learn ways to effectively communicate. Whenever I'm doing a mediation with students, which is common in my career as a school counselor, I like to help them understand just 3 key things. And I like to keep things short and sweet for kids because that helps them to be able to connect with it. I say, I want you to understand 3 things. Each of you has feelings. And they're like, yeah, we both have feelings. Usually they're not very positive ones at that point. You both have feelings. You both have a problem. Whether you both want to admit that it's a problem, we may have some passive aggressive things going on there, but whether we want to admit it, both of you have a problem, and both of you probably have an idea of what the solution would be. Problem is those solutions are probably polar opposites.
Yep.
So when I can get students to understand those 3 things, that is when true conflict resolution mediation can happen. It's when we acknowledge that we both have feelings, we both have a problem, and we both have a possible solution, because that develops right off the bat commonalities between two people that don't think they have anything in common.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I feel like that can work between siblings as well, like in just in any group situation. ever.
Yeah.
I mean,
Use that with your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we talked a little bit about where bullying comes from.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give parents who, let's say, realize that their kid's a bully?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do you do with that?
Well, I think creating a positive and nurturing environment at home, really modeling effective communication, are just kind of foundational things. Modeling boundaries, and that it being okay to set boundaries. Often when children struggle with conflict, it's because they are not used to seeing healthy conflict from their home role models.
Okay.
Just because we have a disagreement, it doesn't have to be an argument.
Okay.
So they need to see that. They need to see what that looks like. If every time, and that's where we go back with, environmental and home environments and those factors, is whenever they see people in their home in disagreement, if it's always yelling, they're going to shy away from any disagreement because they think that it's going to lead to a hostile environment. It's going to be yelling, or it's going to be fighting, or it's going to be, maybe they see domestic violence as a result of somebody just disagreeing. So they need to know what healthy disagreement looks like, and that it doesn't always have to involve yelling. And I think we as parents have to be kind of hold charge of that. But in the same way, I think we also need to start practicing at home safe expression of feelings. That really makes me upset when you do that. I've been trying to ignore this, but it's really starting to get under my skin.
It's like a lot about what we talked about in the school prior to COVID thing is the transparency and the vulnerability. Like, it's okay to be vulnerable with your kids. Like, it's okay to talk about your feelings, because I feel like that's where they learn that it's okay to talk about theirs, as opposed to acting them out or, addressing things with another peer or something.
Sure. And I think it's also important to let them be uncomfortable. One thing that I heard at a school counseling conference a while ago that kind of rocked my world is, in elementary school, which is where most of my experience is, we often greet classes as friends. All right, friends, let's come to the carpet. Okay, friends, we're going to get our day started. But that is making the assumption that every child is their friend. And so it's a false assumption. I know, and you probably know from elementary school, you had 25 people in your class, 20 people in your class. Some of them were your friends. You played with them at recess. You sat with them at lunch. Some of them, they were just kids in your class.
Yep.
You were respectful to them. You were nice to them. But were they really your friends? No. And then some kids you didn't want to associate with at all. And that was okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've created this situation where in any time that you're with a peer group, you're supposed to come out on the other side with friends. I mean, we were talking about that when we first started. My son was at camp this week. They get 3 breaks, 2 5-minute and a 15-minute. And he has this anxiety at the end of the week that he doesn't have any friends, because he wanted to use his 15-minute break to just relax and not have to follow the rules and just be alone. And I'm like, that's you, and that's who you are. And it's okay that you're not coming home with the best friend at the end of this,
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I love that point that like, yes, we need connection in life. It's what drives us all, and it's what makes this world go around. But we don't have to require friendships in every situation.
And that goes to letting them be uncomfortable. Life is a mountain that they have to climb. And if they're used to everything being smooth sailing, those mountains are going to rock their world. So this is the hard part about parenting, right? When you have a child that's dealing with conflict and dealing with bullying at school, and letting things play out is hard, especially if you're like a tiger mom, mama bear, papa bear. But also even in the home between siblings.
Yep.
Like, I sometimes sit back and it's tough to know when do I intervene and when I don't. And that really has to be, I can't tell you necessarily when to get involved and when not. That really has to deal with parenting styles, personality, and then knowing your child.
Yep.
If you're starting to see change in their interest in school, change in their behavior both in and out of school, change in their ability to like get excited about going to school, those are times that I would say that as a parent in general, I would see intervention happening. I know if I had a child that was super excited about going to school, and then all of a sudden that was diminished. Even if I didn't know if it was about bullying, I would want to start investigating.
So let's say, an example, because I'm sure that this happens, that your kid comes home and says, so-and-so made fun of the way I said a word today, or so-and-so made fun of the fact that my teeth are crooked or that my hair looks like this or whatever. It's not really probably quite bullying yet. It's what I would assume is just normal kids trying to find their way. What do we do as parents? We build those kids back up? Do we teach them how to respond to that? Like how can we support our kids as they navigate what I assume is just kind of normal social growth and interaction with others?
So bullying is usually described as something that's repeated over time.
Okay.
That is there's a sequence to it. It's like a habit.
Okay.
If he's coming home every day saying the same child is continuing, then I would err on feeling like that was more bullying. I will say one question I like to ask kids when they tell me that somebody did something, I'll say, how big was that problem for you?
That's a great question.
Was it is that a little deal to you? Is it a medium deal, or is it a big deal?
Because I'm sure there are kids who like connection and like to come talk and say,
Right.
you know, almost like a tattletaling
Right.
and like a preschooler, you know, it's really trying to understand how big that situation was and how deep the hurt is.
Sure. And I think it's confusing for us as parents because we are not sure what they're looking for. Are you telling me because it's just, hey, it was something that happened in my day?
Yep.
Or are you telling me this because it really, really bothers me? And so I think helping them to measure out, is this a small deal, a medium deal, or a large deal, really helps them to self-regulate too. And it helps them
That's
to be able to
fantastic.
decide, how big is this going to be in my world?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so awesome. Is there a lesson in some of this? And I don't want to belittle bullying in any way.
Sure.
But is there a lesson in resilience somewhere in this, and something that we can teach our children? Or do we need to take, like you just said, big, little, small? Like, I mean, do we need to really, really address every issue that comes across?
Sure, I think that's where we let them really drive the boat with that. You know,
Okay.
if they start to say that it's really bothering them,
Mm-hmm.
then they've likely used much of their, resilience
Okay.
already to get to that point. If I can share like a little story,
Yeah,
I have my 10-year-old now, Karis. She was probably in a lower grade. I can't remember which grade, but she rarely comes home and tells me anything about people bothering her. Her school does a great job of just being a really positive, nurturing little kind of hometown environment. And she told me that, someone said something mean to her, and I had done her hair different. So she was like, my hair is different. And I was like, yeah, do you like it? And she was like, yeah, I liked it, but so-and-so said something to me. And I said, well, tell me what that looked like. And she was like, well, I was working at my desk, and he walked across the room, and he said, who did your hair like that? And she said, my mom. And he said, tell her not to do it like that anymore.
I don't mean to laugh, but I mean, it's
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, so I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, that picture that she painted was kind of aggressive for him to get up and walk across the room and seek her out.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be different if she just walked in the door and he was the first person she saw. But then I thought there were teachable moments for, diversity and culture and inclusion there too.
Mm-hmm.
So I did mention it to the teacher, but one thing I said to her that I hope was really powerful to her is, I trust you to know your kids and know your classroom, and to handle this as you see fit in your classroom, as long as it is addressed. Because my child doesn't usually come home and say anything. And I'm not naive enough to think that nobody ever says anything mean to her.
But she uses her resiliency.
Right.
And she wanted to talk to you about it, which means that it hit her a little bit deeper than most things do.
She knew that was different, and that felt different to her. So that is just an example of like when you're like, okay, this may be time for me to intervene.
Wow, that's such a but it all comes down to creating that environment at home where your kids are comfortable coming to you and talking to you, and making sure that they know that we're all imperfect, which I feel like is like
Mhm.
this huge thing that we all come back to, is that
Mhm.
the more approachable we are as parents,
Mhm.
and the more that dialogue happens, the more I feel like we can get ahead of it probably before it gets to be a significant situation.
Mhm. And another thing that I think about too is when we know that our
Mm-hmm.
child is having difficulty with another child in their class,
Yep.
it's helpful that we really model not being hypersensitive as well.
It's so funny because that's the reaction. I mean, you
Right.
just said that child made that comment to your daughter, and I mean, I suddenly was like, "Mama Bear, what does he think he's doing?
Right.
How you don't comment on a girl's hair or body or
Right.
anything. It's just so funny because I feel myself getting hypersensitive to it and protective.
Right. And so we have to really model like an appropriate response to
Mhm.
that. And so, saying, that makes me really angry that somebody made you feel like that.
Mhm.
But when we start yelling and screaming, and I'm going to call that teacher, and I mean, it creates a situation
Mhm.
for that child that they're like, oh gosh, I'm not going to tell my mom that anymore
Mhm.
because she got really upset. She got really mad, and I don't want
Mhm.
to see her or see my dad like that again.
Yeah.
So I think giving them space too.
Mhm.
And I think it's one thing that parents do is when they know that there's a child that their child is having an issue with, is every day they get in the car. Did so-and-so bother you today? Was so-and-so nice to you today?
Mhm.
That's what they do, right?
It's like after your kid has the stomach bug
Right.
and you're like, okay, I think we're okay, but hold on. Do you have a stomach ache? Do you have a stomach ache? Are you
Right.
gonna get sick? Can we leave the house? It's exactly like
And they're going to be
totally.
like, well, maybe I do
Yeah.
have a stomach ache.
Exactly.
Or maybe
100%.
let me cook up some
Yeah.
way that he was mean to me today because I think that's what my mom or dad
wants.
is looking
Yes.
for. So I think asking them questions like creative questions like, what was the best part of your day?
Yep.
Or what was your favorite thing that you learned?
Mhm.
Or my favorite's getting really creative. If you could compare your day to a food, what food would you choose?
Ooh, I like that one. We'll have to use that one at dinner time sometime.
What animal would you compare your mood today to?
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing what they come up with, and sometimes those things that we're looking for can kind of naturally develop from that conversation.
That's fascinating.
Mhm.
I love that idea.
Mhm.
You've given moms in general a little bit of tips in terms of how to communicate back to the school if we feel like it needs to
Mhm.
happen. I see it so often, like on moms groups on social media, hey, so this happened to my kid today. What would you all do? And it's like
Mhm.
the pitchforks are out. And
Right.
every once in a while you'll have a mom or two that's within the school system that gives like some really good balanced advice. But most of the time it's like, storm the school, go up there today.
Right. File a police report.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about best practices if you do want to be seen and heard and make sure that your child is seen and heard as well.
Mm-hmm. I think going through the proper channels first. I think often when parents are emotionally charged, they want to go to the head of the school. They want to go to the principal, right? Or they even a lot of times come to me as a school counselor. They want to come to me. It's really important that we be fair to that child's teacher and let the teacher know first, because it's important that they know what is going on in their everyday that they may or may not even be aware of.
But as a parent, and my kids are not in the school system.
Sure.
I would say, hey, if this is happening as much as my kid is saying and the teacher is not aware,
right,
I'm not wasting my time there. She's not aware of what's going on in her classroom.
Right.
But I think we also need to give educators the benefit of the doubt that there are a lot of things that can happen. That interaction that you described with your daughter, that could have happened in 2 seconds. The teacher may or may not have ever seen that happen. So
right. And it's important to remember that, kids are really, really smart and they are people pleasers naturally. So are they going to do things in front of their teachers that they know their teachers wouldn't desire from them? Probably not. So they're going to be a little sneaky. Yeah. So we don't know what effort went behind making sure that teacher wasn't aware that that interaction happened. So I think that's something to kind of take a step back and remember. But, even if you went to the teacher and, appropriate action wasn't taken, at least you've given that teacher the benefit of the doubt of letting them know first. And many times if you approach someone in a higher position at a school, they will go back to the teacher for background knowledge because To be honest, principals do a great job of being connected with their students and with their teachers and classes, but they are not going to know any child as directly and as well as the people that are
with them every day,
with your child every day. And teachers often can say, I wasn't aware that was happening, but now that you mentioned that, I did see so-and-so over at Karis's desk.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering what happened. And she wasn't as talkative after school, but I thought maybe she was a little tired or, there are so many dynamics that play into that. So I think it's really important that we give our teachers the benefit of the doubt.
So go directly to the teacher.
Yep.
And I would assume that relationship should start prior to there being situations, that build that relationship with the teacher.
Sure. And if you are a parent that knows your child struggles with social interaction, that has, limited social skills or evolving social skills, then that would be almost an introductory experience for you to have with your child's teacher from the beginning.
Yeah.
Hey, my child often struggles with conflict with other children. But
so much of that is so much growth as a parent.
It is.
To realize that we're building imperfect beings, and it's it's such a bigger picture of what we do in motherhood in general and how we separate ourselves from each other and how we don't have these vulnerable moments where, I can sit with another parent and connect over how our kids all struggle a little bit and how we're all trying to support them. But it's such a big, that's such a big thing to be able to say, hey, you know what, my kids, I watch my kids struggle here, here, and here. How can we support each other this year, to make sure that it's a good, positive year?
So that goes to just some straight out of the gate questions for teachers when you meet them. How do you deal with conflict in your classroom? How do you create a positive and nurturing environment for students to learn and grow in your classroom? What is your philosophy on parent involvement at home? How hands-on do I need to be with what they're learning in school? And that could be a whole nother topic of just kind of how to prepare your child for a successful school year and school environment. But those are all great just introductory questions for like open house and those first conferences and things like that.
I love it because it probably gets that teacher thinking. I'm sure they're already thinking about situations like that, but they have so much on their plate. Anything you want to leave us with other than,
Sure. I think remembering that all children have a story. That they
all people have a story
that they come to school with.
And
we never know what that story looks like and what survival skills they have brought to school with them. And many times that is kind of, if the umbrella is bullying or if the umbrella is aggression, what's lying underneath? Or what kinds of interactions are they seeing at home? What types of abuse or trauma have they been exposed to? Do they have a safe person at home that they can talk to?
And it doesn't always have to be, from what I've learned through talking with you and just what I've experienced with my own kids, it doesn't have to be these really big, what you and I would look at as trauma experiences. Like we were just talking about how my 9-year-old has struggled with reading and he probably is somewhere on the dyslexic spectrum somewhere. I don't even know if there's a dyslexia spectrum. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's severe versus not. But he's homeschooled and, we take it a year at a time and, we get him the resources he needs. But when we finally teamed him with somebody who actually understands a little bit more about the way his brain works and talks to him with that dyslexia training, it's almost like he leaves there and his anxiety is lower. He's calmer. He's less reactive, which I could understand in a school setting could lead to him bullying or something like that. But it's so interesting because you labeled that as some sort of trauma, which I hadn't thought about it before. But if you're struggling and you're watching your brother who's 2 years younger than you, reading better than you are, it starts to create these feelings that you're not good enough or that you have these strong feelings where it doesn't have to be a huge trauma situation. It can be little things that just kind of snowball throughout the time.
Well,
So,
he feels empowered, and he's no longer personalizing his disability.
Yep.
There's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
He's understanding that this is how his brain works, and that takes a huge load off.
Yeah,
It's like a big heavy
unbelievable.
backpack
Yeah.
and saying, hey, I'll hold that for you.
Yeah.
And that's the case with so many children, and understanding neuroscience, brain science, the way
Yeah.
their brains work is, understanding that I don't get angry because there's something wrong with me. I get angry because this is biologically how my brain works.
It's such a huge thing.
I'm so a huge advocate of kids understanding how their brains and emotions come into play.
and
Which
they're
is
not broken.
No.
Like that's the whole thing. Is like
Yep.
they're just different. We're all different,
And I think that's kind of the final thing I want to leave with is when children are working through their emotions, we have to give them space. We as adults are fixers. We want to find out what's wrong,
Yep.
who hurt your feelings, who bothered you, and we want to fix it right away. But many times when children are in crisis and when they are upset, when they are dealing with those uncomfortable feelings, they don't have actual access to language. That's why when kids are crying and upset and you say, tell me what's wrong, and they it's not that they're being stubborn. They truly can't engage in language because those are two different parts of their brains that must work at the same time, and it's just not able to happen.
Wow.
So it's important to kind of let them calm down, to let the part of their brain that controls their emotions just kind of calm down and kind of reset before they can do that retelling of what happened so that they can think logically. So I teach kids a lot about just the different areas of their brains and how they work.
That's awesome. It's awesome to learn. They don't teach you this in mom school.
Right. Right.
I mean, they might teach you this in school counseling school, but it's fascinating. It's all the little stuff that you learn, and then you give yourself grace that, it takes you a little while to get there, but it's all amazing tools that we can help our kids to be healthy and we can all grow together. So thank you so much. It's been another awesome kind of learning experience for me, and hopefully it's helpful for our audience as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.